Many people believe that the phrase obey Allah and obey His Messenger in the Quran means we must follow both the Quran and Hadith as two separate sources of guidance. But what if this understanding is incorrect? What if the Quran itself proves that Allah and His Messenger are a single unit in divine command, and that obeying the Messenger simply means obeying the Quran he conveyed? Today, we will analyze the Quranic evidence and Arabic grammar to prove this. This is part 3 of this series of Obey Allah and His Messenger. Let's dive in. Commands in the Quran are always for Allah and His Messenger as one. Let's start with a critical observation. Whenever the Quran instructs people to act for Allah and His Messenger, the action is always singular. Look at these examples. Surah Al-Anfal, chapter 8, verse 24. Respond to Allah and His Messenger when He calls you. Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, verse 80. Those who migrate for Allah and His Messenger. In each case, there is only one migration, one response, and one act of obedience, not two separate ones, one for Allah and another for the Messenger. Now think about this logically. If obeying the Messenger meant following a second independent source of law, Hadith, then would people be required to migrate twice, once for Allah and again for the Messenger? Would they have to respond separately, once to Allah and again to the Messenger? This is absurd. The Quran clearly presents Allah and His Messenger as a single unit in divine command. The Messenger is not an independent lawmaker, rather his role is to convey Allah's rulings. This understanding is reinforced by Surah Al-Ahzab, chapter 33, verse 36, which states, "When Allah and His Messenger have decided a matter, it is not for a believer to have any choice in their affair." Here, the Arabic word qada, meaning decided, is in the singular form, not plural. If the Messenger had an independent authority, the verb would have been qadhaya, dual form. But the singular form proves that all decisions originate from Allah alone, and the Messenger is simply the conveyor of that decision. Grammatical analysis of Al-Anfal, chapter 8, verses 20 and 24. Now let's break down two key verses that are often used to argue that the Prophet had an independent legislative role. Surah Al-Anfal, chapter 8, verse 20. O you who believe, obey Allah and His Messenger, and do not turn away from Him while you hear. Surah Al-Anfal, chapter 8, verse 24. O you who believe, respond to Allah and to the Messenger when He calls you to that which gives you life. Now let's analyze the grammar closely. In Quran chapter 8, verse 20, the verse starts by commanding obedience to both Allah and His Messenger, using the dual object atiu Allah wa rasulahu. However, at the end of the verse, it says, "Do not turn away from Him, wa la tawallau anhu," using the singular pronoun him, anhu, instead of them, anhuma. If Allah and His Messenger were two separate sources of obedience, the verse should have said, "Do not turn away from them," anhuma. But the singular pronoun anhu proves that obedience to the Messenger is inseparable from obedience to Allah. It is not a separate authority. A similar structure is found in Quran chapter 8, verse 24. The verse commands believers to respond to Allah and to the Messenger using the dual object istajibu lillahi wa lil rasul. But then it says when He calls you, ida da'akum, using a singular verb for calling instead of a dual form. Again, if Allah and the Messenger were issuing separate calls, the Arabic grammar would require when they call you, ida da'akuma. The singular verb da'akum confirms that the Messenger's call is nothing but Allah's call, meaning He is conveying the Quran, not adding His own independent laws. The Quran never says transgress limits of Allah and His Messenger. Let's take another important example from Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, verse 14. "And whoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger and transgresses His limits, He will admit him into hell." Here the verse discusses people who disobey Allah and His Messenger. If the Prophet had his own separate laws, the Quran should have said transgresses their limits, hududahuma. But it doesn't. Instead, it only says his limits, hududahu, referring to Allah alone. This proves that all religious laws belong to Allah alone, and the Messenger is only delivering them. Hadith cannot be an independent source of law. Some people claim that when the Quran says obey the messenger, it means we must follow his hadith and sunnah. But this argument contradicts the Quran's own explanation of the messenger's role. Your duty is only to convey the message. Quran chapter 42, verse 48. And the messenger's duty is only to deliver the message clearly. Quran chapter 5, verse 99. If the messenger had an extra source of law, the Quran would have said obey the messenger in addition to the Quran, but it never does. Instead, it equates obeying the messenger with obeying the message he was sent with, the Quran. From all this evidence we learned whenever an action is done for Allah and His Messenger, it is a single action, not two separate ones. The Quran uses singular grammar when referring to Allah and His Messenger, proving they are not issuing separate laws. Obeying the Messenger does not mean following Hadith. It means obeying the Quran He conveyed. So next time someone claims that obey Allah means Quran and obey Messenger means Hadith, ask them, why does the Quran always use singular verbs when referring to Allah and His Messenger? Why does it never say the limits of Allah and His Messenger, only His limits? Why does the Quran emphasize that the Messenger's role is only to deliver the message? The truth is clear. The Quran is the only divine source of law, and the Messenger's role was to convey it, not add to it. Many say Hadith is divine revelation, but here's the twist. A Hadith itself denies this. In Sahih Bukhari 3047, Ali was asked, "Do you have any divine knowledge besides the Quran?" He replied, "No, by Allah, we have no such knowledge. If even Ali, the Prophet's close companion, denied any revelation outside the Quran, why do people insist Hadith is Wahi?" What do you think? Have you heard this argument before? Let's discuss in the comments, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more Quranic analysis. Peace and blessings upon you.